And we're back. Welcome to the Smart to Noise Ratio Pro Audio Podcast. This is episode 47, if you're counting. I'm your humble host, John Dayton, coming to you live from the back couch. Joining me tonight, Anthony Kosobucki. Sir Anthony Kosobucki, I'm told, but he doesn't like to rub it in. So we'll let that lie. All right. Well, as usual, we sort of did the show in advance, kicking stones in Anth's driveway and pacing around his kitchen, talking about this and that. So hopefully we'll be able to remember all of the topics that we covered. Where to start? Start with drum mics?
Yeah.
All right, this is a great trick, kids. You're going to love this. Anth had this drum session going, and for no reason other than that he could not hear what the drummer was saying to him in between takes, grabbed whatever mic was on hand and did.
I had a spare. Usually I use my KSM 44s for overheads, which I found out today Josh prefers over 81s, even though I have a ceiling lower than the one in my living room, in my drum room. So I had an extra KSM 44, and it was a real light session, brushes, super muted kick drum, barely any toms or cymbals, a ride cymbal with a sizzle on it. And I couldn't hear the guy talking to me because all the mics were so spaced out for the sound I wanted to get. I was like, well, I got this. I'm just going to throw it on a stand, pointed it pretty much at a corner, sort of towards his head, just so I could hear him talking, and forgot to unrecord enable it when I tracked. But I had the volume pulled down and stuff, so it wasn't feeding back or getting in his ears or nothing like that. So I came back and hit the shortcut to bump it up to 0 when we listened back to it, and the drums sounded killer. Like, you could hear the brushes hitting the different depths of the coating on the snare drum good. It just sounded great, and that was probably 7 or 8 months ago. And finally, we took it into California Road Studios, where John's Trics is recording their album, and I'm mixing and mastering the project that I'm working on now. And the other engineer opened up the session. He's listening. He's like, "Dude, this is the way you record drums. This sounds fantastic." And the only things that were on were the crap mic that I shot at a wall and the kick drum. And he's like, hold on a second. No, it sounds better without the close mics. I just left it like that. So he's like, it's a perfectly summed mono mix of all your drums. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It was 100% an accident, and I almost deleted the track because they're like, oh, it's just, a vocal mic. Nope. That was it. That was the magic. That's what's going to the 2 mix.
And the beauty of that is what Anth was taking advantage of there is I was going to say proximity effect. I got sidetracked already. The boundary effect, which is what PZM microphones take advantage of. PZM stands for pressure zone microphone, and it just has to do with the phase of signals arriving in a mic that have been reflected off a large flat surface, being very good and very in, and generally very pleasing. Mm-hmm. So if you park a mic next to a large a large flat surface, you can get a lot out of it.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember. I don't even remember if it was an Omni or cardioid. I really don't. It was probably an Omni, just because I wanted.
Yeah, if it was, you can get PZMs as it's actually called half cardioid.
The PCC, the partial cardioid condenser.
Yeah, something like. Well, yeah, I'd have to look it up. I don't want to say it wrong because the internet will jump up and smack me. But
all I have in my brain is that episode of South Park where the internet was broken and the kids had to go to this cavern, and there's just this big giant Linksys router with a blinking light on it, and that was the internet. And no one could figure out how to fix the internet, and one of the kids just went back there and switched
unplugged
it on
for 10 seconds. Yeah,
right.
Well, anyway, what a PZM gets you is because it's laying on a surface, it obviously can't pick up anything below that surface. So you get, instead of a 360-degree Omni, you get half of an Omni. And actually, if you ever have a pair of those to play around with, they make a cool set of room mics if you tape 2 of them back to back.
Yeah. It's almost like a figure 8. It's pretty close to...
Yeah, except they
overlap a little bit, don't they?
Well, it's almost like having a single Omni mic because there's no def spot. Like with a figure 8, there's that spot in between the 2 patterns where, like, off the sides, it is deader than dead. It's like It's not just that the mic's a little deaf there; it's literally electrically dead. So, having a pair of those for an Omni lets you get very good phase relationships because the mics are so close to each other. They're only separated. The pickup, the capsule on that mic is hovering, just a fraction of an inch above the plane of the back plate. And with two back plates taped right close together, it's yeah. I keep losing my train of thought already. Hang on a second. And we're back again, hopefully with a little more clarity. Okay, sorry for the brief pause there. I had to get some things sorted out. Anyway, so that's the whole drum microphone thing before I got all caught in a whirlwind and didn't know left from right and up from down.
Hopefully that happens again. I can't remember if I did that on any other tracks, but
it makes me want to try it.
It gets me out of sampling stuff and replacing things. That'd be great.
And speaking of drum mics, we had done on my project down at the same spot, California Road. When we set up our kit in the room, we did all the usual close mics, included a snare drum trick that Anth likes to do, duct taping a 451 to the side of a 57 or an I5 for the snare top. That's gorgeous. And then for overheads, we had KSM 32s in sort of a Glenn Johns thing. And we are still using the close mics on the toms. We had 421s all the way around to get that big rock and roll sound. We're not looking for a total loose, airy kit sound.
Right.
And then for room mics, we had a Bloom line set up about 10 feet away from the kit at head height. And also,
squash the piss out of those things.
Actually, we didn't.
Oh, we didn't?
No.
Did you turn that off after I left?
Well, no, we kept. The problem was we had the Bloom line running through my Joe Meek, Anthony's my Joe Meek twin Q, and we were beating up the inputs a little bit, which they're transformer inputs, and they sound kind of good when you do that, but not when the red light's on more than it's off.
Right.
So we backed off the input gain, made it up with the output gain, but we never really reestablished the compressor settings. So it really
didn't really trip.
It wasn't compressing much. Yeah. But those inputs do sound awfully good. Like, I sort of feel about that box kind of the way Anth feels about his Avalon, that it's a cool set of pre's.
The in and out knobs are good.
Yeah, that's all you need. But anyway, we had for a single overhead above the drummer's head, we had a Neumann U87 in figure 8 configuration. And I was like, all right, well, I guess we'll pick and choose. I wasn't really in on the drum mic choices. So anyway, while we were packing up for the end of the last session of tracking drums, Brandon, the other engineer on the job, brought up that he doubles that Neumann figure 8 track, throws one of them out of phase, and plays those against the Bloom line, which is, two mics creating, close enough together that you create an Omni mic, but that gives you stereo separation.
Right.
Which is sort of where I was going. That's a better way to say what I was talking about, like when you tape two PZMs back to back, or better yet, if you have like a piece of glass or plexiglass that's a little bit bigger, because PZMs are limited. Their low end response is limited by the size of the surface that you attach them to. So if you plunk them on a stage, they'll have a really large surface to work on, get a lot of, if you're using it in drama, you get a lot of foot traffic and stuff. So you'll see them sitting on
foam
on something on foam, like a hard surface, but then that's put on top of a piece of foam to insulate it a little bit. If you tape one to a wall, you also get a lot of low end, and depending on what you're doing, that can work out great for you. Mm-hmm. But just know that if you are using one, a lot of the times the reasons people don't like them is because, it doesn't have enough low end response. Everything sounds really tinny and crispy. So duct tape that sucker to a music stand, or take the glass out of a picture frame, or heck, just tape it right to the picture frame and move the picture frame around.
Use it as a prop, son.
Yeah,
get creative.
So the process of putting two back to back, either directly back to back and having not a lot of low end response, or back to back with a piece of glass or something in between them, you get the effect of a full Omni mic, but you get each half of it coming back on one channel. So you get a complete image of the room that you can then mess around with the width of the stereo panning width of, and it should sum together pretty nicely if you're worried about that sort of thing. All right, so that's it for drum mic, and I think that's all the advice we got for you this week.
Yeah.
Apart from crushing the room mics, that's almost always a good idea.
Yeah, especially if you got a real pair of 1176s that I've so nicely had the pleasure to work with.
Which is a perfect segue to where we were going next.
Yeah.
We've talked about our Jones to be developing things here, and how we have Hammond organ parts laying around, and I've got not a ton of experience, no formal training or anything, but have loved playing around with electronics my whole life, and really have just been always forever lacking either the money or the time. I either have loads of time and no money, or some money and no time. So development is a little bit stunted, but Anthony's been thinking about building kits.
There's just so much great stuff out there. The 1176s that I've been using are Josh, the studio manager and senior engineer over at California Road, was very gracious enough to let me borrow one of them. There's a place called Hairball Audio, which will sell you the kits, which includes like the box and the knobs and all the parts, or not all the parts, but the hardware end of it. And then they actually have set up on Mauser or DigiKey or whatever shopping carts with all of the revision whatever you want to put in there.
All the rest of the critical components.
Right, so you don't have to spend 4 years of your life digging around Mauser, because that site is a huge giant pain in the ass if you've ever been on it. Unless you have the exact stock number.
And even then,
it still takes you half an hour to find out.
Mauser is a wonderful resource, but boy, is it a pain in the butt to navigate, because like any search that you do will either return 0 results or 4.9 million results.
Right.
And then you have to filter it down.
And sometimes even when you filter it down by everything, you get no results. Like this is the part number. Everything matches up. Nope. And you take one of those things out and you're back up to like 500,000 results. And it's Mauser's. I feel like you need to have some kind of degree in coding and in electronics to be able to properly navigate.
And your uncle has to work there.
Right. Yeah, but he's got some Revision A 1176s that he built, which sound great. They're the blue stripe version of them. So it's, the traditional black 1176 box with a blue stripe on it, and they sound great. And the nice thing about the Revision A's that I found out today, actually, that I'd never really gotten into before, was that there is enough gain in the input circuit to utilize it as a preamp by itself.
That's a cool trick. I did not know that.
Yeah, and that's, we were talking today, he's like, yeah, if you're driving the input above 9 o'clock, you're going to get tons of noise. It's like, oh, well, that's why the vocals sound so warm.
Warm.
Yeah, right. Warm. Well, yeah, they sound great, but they sound really good on vocals. The Revision A's do, but you start getting into, I think what I've decided is when I build them, I want to do the Revision D. It's not as bright. I feel like the Revision D is like the classic 1176. It's the black face. Mm-hmm. It's what everybody uses on everything. They're definitely more plentiful, I feel, than the Revision A's. You can't walk into a place and look at some and be like, oh, they've got some of those. You're like, that's what they look like. But I think that's the direction that we're heading, and Josh is trying to get me to buy 3 kits so me, John, and Josh can all sit down one night and build 1176s, because we're all kind of nerds like that.
That sounds like, apart from some glowing moments that I've spent with my family, I feel like those 4 hours would probably be the highlight of my month.
That, and even if we don't get there, he's got an SSL master bus compressor that he's got all the parts for. He just needs time to put together, and a stereo LA2A.
Nice.
That he's got all the parts for. It just needs time to put together. So I feel
I have paid time off left that I'm going to get yelled at if I don't take. So I'm going to take it, but I'm not going to tell my wife. I'm going to go over to the studio and build Josh's gear for him.
I brought my Weller and Mountain Dew. I'll be back in 5 hours.
Show me to the B room.
Yeah, I'll get high on solder fumes all day and make us some sweet tube gear. But
yeah,
we were talking in the driveway about everybody makes a Neve copy. Everybody's got that, and they sound great. There's nothing wrong with Neve's stuff. It's probably both of our favorite movie right now that Josh is actually probably watching at this moment, because I let him borrow it today, is Sound City, and the whole movie is essentially based around that Neve desk, and it sounds fantastic, and there's nothing wrong with it at all. But I personally really dig API stuff. I like how tight it is, but how open the top end is and how pushed the mids are.
He can say educated sounding stuff like that. I just like, all I know is that I like albums that are made on API
She
stuff.
sounds good.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All my favorite stuff was made on API desks.
Yeah, and I guess with the exception of vocals, I don't think I've heard anything that I would like better on anything else. I love how grindy the bass guitar gets and how much, how much punch the electric guitars have, and then drum sound, sweet Jesus. If you can find a better drum sound than API toms, I'd like to hear that. It just sounds good on everything. And, okay, fine, have an extra SSL pre or a Neve around for vocals if you really must. But it seems like the API stuff hasn't been copied and reproduced as much as SSL stuff or
and
Neve
that is
stuff.
Because they have their own op amps made.
Proprietary 2520s or whatever they are.
And you cannot get them.
Because
even if your uncle does work there, you cannot get them. Because they x-ray your uncle on his way out of the plant every night to make sure he doesn't have any of his lunchbox or of his keister.
There are at least five contracts with Satan over those. But it's like Dumble amps. They coat it all in opaque epoxy, and you have to melt the whole damn thing, and there's some kind of concoction in there that strips all the colors off the resistors. And
so anyway, we decided if we were going to build something, because Anth's looking to make his way in the studio world, and I'm looking to ride his coattails to stardom. So what we were thinking is, all right, either you have the money and you buy real Neve stuff, which honestly it isn't that expensive, but it's too expensive for us.
Right.
Or you call up Hairball Audio and you have them ship out some kits, and those are still some money. So we're looking to get even more down and dirty. So you can find guys all the time that understand this stuff well enough and have the time to, try this op amp, try that op amp, or better yet, like build their own op amps out of discrete components, and get something that's not exactly like, but who cares if it's exactly like? Because anybody with
some money,
with a fat enough wallet, can go out and buy exactly like. It's not like API stuff is that expensive. But anyway, the idea for us is to try and build something on basically no budget.
Right.
Like on whatever couple of bucks is left over out of the gas money at the end of the week.
Right.
And build a pre, or better yet, build like 4 pre's in one box. Because then you save, and you only have to build one power supply and buy one chassis and print one circuit board.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at. And then, think of that. Like, okay, I have a Neve. There's one level of prestige. That means you have a very fat wallet. I have a Neve copy. That's another level of prestige. Maybe you built it yourself and somebody will give you a little credit for doing that soldering, but it still means you have a pretty fat wallet. I built this API sort of copy out of stuff I found laying around in like a boombox I took apart and an old Hammond organ. My design.
I don't know if those parts all work together.
See,
my Sony's pretty beat. That boombox has seen better days.
So's the Hammond.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just feel like that's sort of the highest level. That's why the Neve stuff and the API stuff is so looked up to, is because the designs are unique and unique sounding.
They're so good
and robust. So not to say that we would be able to come up with anything better, but no. I feel like there's a certain cachet there when you got a piece of kit in your rack that you made. Like it doesn't say like Neve by Anthony on it. It's like the Anth box by Anth. So
I made it and screen printed that shit. Funny enough, the guy that I used to work for doing screen printing showed up today at California Road.
Oh, would he be willing to do us a one-off when we finally build a pre?
Maybe. Probably. I'd get somebody to do it cheaper.
Yeah.
But yeah, he showed up, and I didn't know that he actually used to have Josh's job at the studio. He wasn't the studio manager. He was the production manager. And then he left and ran Tour City, and I worked for him there, and subsequently didn't know this morning that I'm wearing a shirt that I stole because it was a misprint from when I used to work for that guy.
It's a small world we're finding.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so what else were we talking about before we started up here? This is the problem with doing the show twice, is stuff sounds so good when we're just hanging out talking.
Well, that's a good idea. We talk it and cover it in like 10 minutes because we spent half an hour going through it before.
Well, that's good. The show's a little more concise that way.
Right.
I just need to start writing stuff down. I need to take notes when we're just hanging out BS.
Although
Although never mind. I won't out.
You can build a Fairchild clone. Cost about $4,000 to build a clone.
Just to build a clone?
Just to build a clone. Josh was walking me through it earlier today. He's like, yeah, there's just whatever Drip Electronics or something like that sells you the board, all the parts and everything. And by the time you buy all the parts, before you even put it in a box, it's $4,000 plus all the time. When it gets to that point, is it just easier to risk the felony and steal one? I don't know.
I wonder about building a distressor clone, a low buck distressor.
Oh, we never got into that before. I've thought about telling this story a couple times, but when I was over at GCR Studios, which is the other, I've got the privilege of knowing and being able to work with the two nicest studios in Buffalo. GCR is the one owned by one of the members of the Goo Goo Dolls. And I was talking to the studio manager there. His name's Justin, who actually grew up with Josh in Barker. They went to the same church and youth group in high school and all that stuff. And now they're both running the nicest studios in Buffalo. But I was asking him about the gear, and like, you know, they have an actual LA2A and 3A and some Purple Audio MC77s, which are essentially 1176, I think, revision D or E clones, or maybe revision F. I can't remember. I was like, but you got a pair of distressors too. He's like, yeah, I love those things. And then he sighed. He's like, but it's not that I have a problem with them. It's like every time I use them, they're just laughing in the face of all the original gear that I have sitting right next to it. He's like, because come on, you hit the nuke button. You know what that's doing. You know that's just, oh, here's an 1176. Wham. You don't even have to screw around for 5 minutes trying to get all the buttons to stick. Like... He's like, I love the way they sound. I use them on pretty much every record that we do here. It feels a little bit blasphemous using those when you got the real stuff right there. He's like, it's not going to stop me from using it though.
Right. Does anybody make a distressor plug-in yet? I
think UAD does, but it's one of those things you have to buy the card, like the PCI card for. I wish Waves made one. So I didn't have to go out and buy all, because I think the UAD stuff only works on either a card or some kind of, flash drive or something like that, which is fine, but I've got plugins. I don't have money to go out and spend and bump up to the UAD stuff. It would be nice to have a drive that just, all right, just start out a session, put a channel strip plugin on it, like the API slate thing, and then throw an 1176 on every channel. Just because you can. And it doesn't slow down your CPU. And it's fine. But I'm not there yet. I'd like to be, but I'm not. Mm-hmm. Trying to think of any other stories I've got.
I was just counting the seconds there to see. I think that might be the longest stretch of dead air we've had.
In a while, yeah.
And you've been a lot drunker than this before.
Right, yeah.
Oh, I remember what I was going to bring up. I had been endeavoring to try and come up with some new little tidbit of freshly released gear, and one of our favorite companies, Focusrite, just put a couple of new bits and pieces on the market. They're actually not on the market yet. I signed up to get notified about one of them. The one that's going to appeal, and I'm actually probably going to plug a lot on Reddit, is what is it? The 18?
The 18i20, I think.
18i20. Little box. It's a little bit bigger than the 2i2, and you get.
It's a full rack mount space, isn't it? It's
no. Well, no. There's a bigger one than that. It's the 20 whatever.
Oh, okay.
20i18. It's like the other way around or something like that. I should probably have the Focusrite website up. But anyway, the one that's most interesting to me, I was thinking, yeah, like that. Get that one. 8 mic pre's actually on it, plus all your other, 8-at optical and SPDIF and AES. But this little guy, it's only a little bit bigger than a 2i2. 4 honest to goodness mic pre's on it.
Yep.
They're all 4 of them are also line as an option. They have the multifunction.
The input, the
universal inputs, and then 2 of them. The first 2 they also have an impedance switch to plug electric instruments directly in, just like some of the smaller units do. Phantom power on it, dual headphone outs with separate volume controls, and then the kicker is that it's also got MIDI, SPDIF, ADAT. It can basically act as a router for like any other pre that you have around that doesn't have USB in it. So like if you've got an Octo pre, optical in, actually the only thing I think it doesn't do is AES EBU, which is a bit of a shame.
I've never used it, so I'm not.
I actually prefer it. Like, not that SPDIF is bad, but SPDIF can be more prone to problems if it doesn't have a good clock signal.
Oh, good lord! Yeah, the SPDIF on Joe is rough, to say the least. I actually had to stop using it because it doesn't, unless you tie everything together. They're ticks all the time.
And Joe doesn't have a word clock input.
It does.
Oh, it does.
It does. I just don't have a word clock. Like, I think I could.
Doesn't your
daisy chain
RME
it.
stuff have a BNC word clock out?
Yeah. No, it's got a word clock in, I think. I don't know. I've never had to use it because all the RME stuff is all synced over ADAT, so I've never had an issue with it. One of the pre's acts as my clock, and then everything else runs through the interface off of it. So that's all synced and fine, and
there's more than one way to sync a device. Now, it's been so long since I've actually had my hands on my Joe Meek that I forget what all's on the back panel of it, but isn't there an option on that thing to determine, like, if you're using the SPDIFs? Wait, does it have AES too, or just SPDIF? Oh, yeah, just use the AES. the clock signal's better on that. But I think if you're using SPDIF, you can determine whether it's generating its own clock or
slave.
Yeah, and I think it works out better if it's the slave.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what else it's got. Oh, it's got a sample rate option on it. So it'll go up to 96.
Things I didn't know about my own gear.
Right. I'm pretty sure I don't have any extra ADAT ports. I'm all tied up, but I think there's a light pipe out on that too.
I believe you're right.
I think there is.
So anyway, a lot of the guys, I see it in the forums all the time, like, what should I buy for my first interface? And really, a Focusrite, if you're going to buy cheap stuff, well, actually, their stuff isn't cheap. It's inexpensive.
Right.
It's, for the money you pay for it, it's more well-made than it has a right to be. It sounds better than it has a right to. And it just looks good doing it. Mm-hmm. Those little red boxes.
Yep.
Tasty. So this one, with four honest-to-goodness mic pre's on it, and 4 more line inputs, if you got a little console or a couple other pre's laying around, like, you could easily do drum sessions with that. I feel like even just with kick snare and a pair of overheads, you could do a heck of a drum session. And if you are going to do close mics, just run
through some separate pre's.
Yeah, right. You got a little console around with some direct outs, or if you got a couple other discrete pre's, use this little Focusrite as a sort of a hub for all your interfacing needs. Pipe it into your DAW, and off you go.
Yep. And I even used it. Well, SPDIF only supported 2 channels, right? At the time.
Yes.
Okay. My Scarlett, I got the 8i6, but I've used that over SPDIF to drive into my Octamic or Octa, whatever the Fireface. I'm sorry. There's an extra 2 pairs or an extra pair of inputs, which turned out great because there's the Fireface is a nice interface. It's from what I've read and from using it for the last few years, I think it's close to top of the line for the prosumer type stuff. Like, the pre sound okay.
Oh, what a filthy word.
Yeah. That's what it is. Like, it's not that nice. It's nice enough. Like, it sounds, you plug it in, you're like, that sounds clean. Yeah, that's the word. Sounds clean.
Clean, but not good. It's got that Yamaha thing
it's
going on.
It's not quite that sharp, but it's pretty close. It's, you're definitely hearing a little bit more air than you would with something with some color in it, but it functions. It works good for what I need it to, I guess. Most of the time.
I felt so bad for you. Anth was telling me the story the other day. He was like, "Oh yeah, Fireface. Yeah, that's pretty top end for the prosumer market." Yeah,
it is
okay.
Well, I can't complain about it. I mean, that's what they had when I started working there, and I've yet to have an issue with it other than the way it sounds. Like,
well, at least it does.
It turns on. I don't know.
It turns on, doesn't mess up the sessions, as long as all the dip switches are in the right spot.
Oh, yeah, the dip switches. I don't know why it couldn't be an internal function, but to run the clock off of one of the preamps, you have to flip dip switches, and my problem being that I've got some sessions at 48 and some at 44.1. If I don't switch them before Pro Tools opens, everything's got to get restarted.
There's such a lot of restarting with Pro Tools. That was one thing. Well, the last session we were on, it's
It's
Pro
power
Tools.
cycling, so you can get more power into it. That's what it is.
Takes that long to recharge the rails.
Yeah.
But yeah, I couldn't believe how many times Pro Tools locked up and was just being slow and not finding things. And everybody in the room knows I'm a Reaper guy. Actually, what were they saying were you around when I walked into the live room? Yeah, you were.
Oh,
you were
yeah,
sitting there,
Reaper
Eddie?
probably does that a few times. Every time you walk in the room, I'm like, oh, well, Reaper wouldn't have a problem doing drum edits by itself. He just gave it $1 and walked away. Like,
I'll tell you, life's awful easy in Reaper. Like, the thing I couldn't do is, like, the lag. Like, when I would sit down to drive the bus, like, hit the space bar, like, oh, no, you can't just hit the space bar. You have to wait for it to, catch up.
you have to reach underneath and...
Yeah, gently jostle a few things. Slip it a $5. Like, yeah. Slow Tools. That nickname has never stopped being truth. But it's the industry standard, so give Abbott all your money.
It was funny. One of the sessions that I had was something stupid today. The first song me and Josh started working on, it took about, I don't know, we started at 10 and finished at like 4.
Just waiting for it to boot up.
Oh, yeah, waiting
Save
for it to boot
failed.
up
What?
3 times.
I haven't started yet. What do you mean save failed?
The machine's off, man.
What do you mean there's 188 regions not found? There's only 2 regions in the project.
It's stems. It's a 2-bus. But it was, what was it? It was something dumb, like 49 tracks or 52 tracks wide. And the thing with HD is that you only have so many voices you can utilize, and those get eaten up by buses and tracks. And if you put plugins in the wrong order, it eats up. If you put an RTOS plugin in front of a TDM plugin, that uses a voice.
It's a Pro Tools thing. You wouldn't understand.
That's pretty much what it was. And like, what was funny was that I was running the session just fine on my 13-inch MacBook. With all the plugins running and like, okay, hitting like 65, 68% CPU usage, but it was still running. We put it into Pro Tools HD and it was like, why don't you figure
the heck out of there?
Why don't you sort your stuff out before you try and make me run a session?
So did you wind up with the Pro Tools HD8 system with the D command holding up your 13-inch MacBook plugged into the iPod inputs of the studio?
There's a headphone jack, son. There were a few times where me and Josh were both like, well, if it works on the MacBook, let's just hook it up to the monitors and run.
That's my life. I got asked. Anth was asking me if I wanted to master something for him. If he could get me into GCR. And I'm like, yeah, I'd plug my MacBook into their monitors. But yeah, they have a this and a that. I'm like, repeatability. Anyway, that's enough griping about Pro Tools. Someday, Reaper users will be able to walk the streets with their heads held high and not suffer under all the oppression of Pro Tools. I have to watch my mouth so careful in the forums, lest I be labeled as one of these rabble rousers. But no, I was just offering Reaper as a suggestion, as a low cost option and a better option, and a not so crashy or latent or.
But they don't make their own I/O, do they?
No, because it works with everything, even Pro Tools stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it'll find a venue, no problem. Brandon did it.
Yep, that's true.
It did crash. I will give him that is a stroke.
He was trying to run and record a whole session over Firewire 400, though.
Oh, okay.
So...
Yeah. All right.
There's some issues with that.
Firewire is a little picky, even native on a Mac.
Especially a 400.
Yep. Okay. So that's...
That I think that ended up being his issue with it, but it's funny. Like all the guys that use are like, oh yeah, we got Pro Tools rig and all that stuff. When you sit down and start working with them and it crashes, the words and just the composition of sentences that comes out while Pro Tools is doing dumb stuff. It makes using Pro Tools worth it.
Well, I hear listening to Joe curse out Pro Tools is a thing. Like that scene in A Christmas Story. Where,
it's poetic.
Some men worked in oils or stone. My old man worked in profanity. Somewhere hanging in the air over Lake Michigan, a blue cloud.
Working with Joe is one of my favorite things in the entire world. I don't care if I'm learning anything or actually doing anything. I've had more fun just sitting in a room watching him throw inanimate objects at other inanimate objects or animate objects. Just
based on what Pro Tools errors are coming out. Yep, that is not funny. Actually, you know, I'm gonna go ahead and like just flat out poke fun at Pro Tools. Like, forget the okay, one guy took a drive and left and did some work in 10, and another guy took a drive and left and did some work in 9, and then when we came back and tried to work in 8, there were some issues.
Volcanoes started erupting in the back lot, and
the planets shifted in their orbits. There may have been a partial solar eclipse. Sorry, guys, that was our fault. But
just one letter on the extension. That was another thing. There's certain functionalities that just work in 10, not so much in 8.
Yeah,
Clip
but the thing that really burnt my biscuits was tracking drums for 3.5 hours, hitting Command Fs religiously, also having the automatic backups turned on. Go to take a break. There's nothing there but the first take.
No one had an answer. No one had an answer for that. The guy that teaches Pro Tools classes at a college has no answer.
Yeah, the error code for that is nope.
It just he tried to recreate it. He tried to figure it out, and he's like, he didn't know what happened. Everything, like, because he's pretty good. Like, Josh knows all of his error codes inside and out, and like we got a couple of them today. He's like, oh, that means I need to restart. Whap. And that happened a couple times, and you know, he's like, it shouldn't be doing that. It really shouldn't. Like, you know, I'm trying to forget. I think he's been working there for like 6 or 7 or 8 years now, and he's been running that rig since he got there, and there's no actual reason that anybody could think of why it just decided to not save anything. But we got better takes the next day, so
I think our gremlins from work followed us down there. It had to be, because they just
it's only 2 turns, so maybe.
On the live sound side of things, I had an outside group that same weekend. I had to leave the session and go back up to work to get this outside group going for church, and they walked on stage at 3:15, got all the gremlins worked out, played through their set twice, and went to dinner at 5:30, so I was pretty proud of that. But I had more stuff pop up they were just a 6-piece band: drums, bass, 2 guitars, acoustic guitar player that sang, and a chick that sang. That was it. That was my whole input list. It wasn't half of what I usually go through, and I had more trouble just getting like, what do you mean there's no click track? Like, what the heck? At one point, one of them said, "We're so glad to hear you say that isn't just us at our home church, that this happens to everybody everywhere." So that was a nice little moment. It did turn out to be a cool set. It was one of those moments, like, you listen to big productions with hundreds of tracks and, you know, all kinds of instrumentation. Like, okay, yeah, that's big. And then you listen to ZZ Top, and it's just 3 dudes, and somehow it's bigger. This is when, you know, I've got 13 people and a full choir on stage, and don't get me wrong, we could make some big old rock and roll, but the stuff these guys were able to do, and they had just the 2 littlest Vox combo amps. They weren't even tubed. They were those little solid state. I think it's the MR15. Yeah. It's got like tremolo and chorus in it, a couple little pedal boards. And man, I had an army of guitars out there. It was wall to wall. So, but I digress. Now shoot, I had another topic to shoot to. We went out of order, but that's okay. We pretty much covered everything we were going to cover there. So the other thing, I feel like we can wind up the show with this, to tie together that little Focusrite box. One of the most frequently asked questions on the forums is, okay, I'm getting started. What mic do I buy? What interface do I buy? So I thought we would just spur the moment. This was my idea, but I hadn't thought about it any, just so we could kind of talk through it as we go, maybe come up with an answer. Set a couple of budget points and figure out how to get from, you know, the starting line to recording tracks in your bedroom or your garage. Mm-hmm. So let's say the first price point is, let's not go too low, but let's say $200 to $250. Mm-hmm. What are a couple options you can get to? Now, the first one I can think of is like, okay, let's say you only have $100. Mm-hmm. You get on eBay, you get yourself an SM57 and probably an ART USB dual pre. Mm-hmm. So that's a mic that's not great on anything, but that's pretty good on everything, and a functional USB interface that can also be a headphone amp for you, and eventually power some monitors for you. So that's the absolute bargain basement. $100, you can record tracks with that, and then going up another step. This is where we can kind of go in a couple of different directions. So I'll lead off and then see if Anth can come up with a better idea. If you have $250, my first pick, obviously, the Scarlett 2i2 from Focusrite. 2 mic pre's that are also line or instrument level ins. 2 line level outs that can, drive a pair of studio monitors when you get them. Headphone out, phantom power on it, boom, done. That's it. Works. You plug it in and it just works. The only thing I don't like about it is you can't use it standalone. So like that little ART. One time I desperately needed 2 more mic inputs on a live event. I had a 24-channel console. I had 26 inputs. I was going to use my Scarlett as a standalone pair of mic pre's, but it won't operate unless it's plugged into a computer. Yeah. So anyway, Scarlett, what are they, about $120, $130?
Yeah, for the one that you got.
If you jump on Amazon. So dirt cheap. Out of your $250, you still have more than $100 left. So I would say, to get going in the studio, probably the MXL package, the 990 and the 991.
Oh, yeah.
So you get a large diaphragm, side address, cardioid condenser, and
a little pencil
condenser. So you can point the pencil at your acoustic guitar, sing into the large diaphragm, or use them both on the guitar, play around with some multiple miking situations. You could probably do some drum miking with that if you were going for sort of an open, airy room sound. Get the large diaphragm sort of in front of the kick drum, not right in front of the kick drum, like you do, but get the pencil as an overhead. A lot of stuff you could do with that. You could mic up small guitar cabinets without fear. I mean, what the heck? You know, if your Marshall stack blows up your $50 MXL condenser, what's it matter?
Right.
So, all right. So that's my pick. So, what would you do if you had $250 in your pocket? This is assuming, of course, that you already have a computer. If you really need a computer, $250 will get you a netbook, which you can do a surprising amount of audio with. One of those little Acer jobs for another $250 from Walmart.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what I know Avid's got a couple packages like an M-Box and
there you go,
Pro Tools LE, and it comes with a microphone and a windscreen. I think those are about $250 or $300. And those aren't bad. Just, the M-Boxes get old and you grow out of them pretty quick.
Right. Well, you're going to grow out of any of this pretty quick. Hence the second most common post, I want to do proper drum tracking. What interface should I get? Because I need 8 inputs.
At least 8 inputs, yeah.
My choice would be 4 2i2s.
Stack those suckers until the end of the day.
Still cheaper than an Octopre.
Yep.
Well,
the connectivity too, so you still need an interface to get in.
Yeah, the old Octopres don't have connectivity.
That's probably, I'd probably do something along the M-Box route. I don't know if the M-Box have them. I know some of the other Digi stuff has Focusrite pre's in it, like the Digi O2, which, like, if you're not buying new stuff, you're buying used stuff. I've seen a Digi O2 go for $200 on Craigslist or on eBay, and those have 4 real Focusrite pre's.
Yeah, there you go.
And MIDI and line inputs and outputs, and I think there's a light pipe in it. I think I said MIDI. So $200 there, and then save up an extra $100, get yourself a 57, or you can find a used 57 for $50 somewhere.
Oh, easily. And actually, here's a little tidbit for almost anything. Mics especially, you need to be careful what you buy used, but for mics in particular, you can jump on eBay and find a microphone with more than 80% of its life left in it for quite often 50% of the original purchase price.
Yeah, and I mean, if we're going for something that'll last longer, the SM7Bs come up usually in between.
Yeah, for a dynamic mic,
$200, $250.
They're super. Super.
They recorded Thriller on it. You know, a lot of guys still use them for lead vocals. I think, was it Michael Bublé or one of the other, I don't want to say crooner because that's not right, but that type of music in the studio, that guy sings on an SM7B. And it sounds great. It sounds great
for a lot of stuff too. Guitars,
They really do. Like, that would be up on the top of my list with stuff that I want to get with like an RE20 and a couple 421s.
New 421s or old ones?
Yeah, new 421s. You drunk?
Well, yeah, I had a sip of your tilt kilter there.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the $250 solution. Let's double up $500 to get you started recording. What do you buy? You go first this time, and I'll follow up.
I guess it depends on if you're doing live music or if you're doing processed stuff. Like, because I feel like a lot of guys that are getting into it their first time aren't really recording.
Well, if you're just going to be making EDM
you know?
in your bedroom, you need a copy of Fruity Loops, and off you go. Like a cracked copy that you're going to torrent. Like, let's let those guys sort themselves out. I'm talking about people that like want to actually take real sounds out of the universe and get them into their computer.
How much do those PG-81s cost?
The what?
The PG-81s.
Oh, those don't get those. I actually wrote about. Have you not been reading the blog lately?
I saw it. I just want to see what you say about them.
They're better than nothing for. I forget. I didn't look up price for them for what they cost, but just because they say 81 on them, yeah, they don't. They just do not have
the first two alpha. Not alphanumeric, but just alphabet letters make a difference in what you're getting.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't have any pencil condensers, PG-81s are probably better, but don't even waste the. I think you can get two of them for $100.
Yeah.
There's other. Actually, you can get an Audix ATS-25 for like $40. Get a pair of those. I used one of those for a drum overhead at a church gig a couple of years ago, and I was pleasantly surprised by it. So yeah, there's plenty of cheap ways.
I'm still like, for that price point, spend a couple $100 on your interface, because that realistically, you can probably find somebody that'll let you borrow a mic or two.
That's another thing to consider too. It's good to get in the forums and ask about stuff, but really you should be looking around your neighborhood and see who has gear that you can actually go and listen to, or better yet, borrow and try to do your own stuff with.
Yeah,
or find out how good Guitar Center's return policy is.
Right. Yeah. Take out a credit card and just take it back in 30 days and then do it again. They don't care. They're soulless. One of my friends, there's a campaign going on to increase Guitar Center wages and all that stuff, because they slashed them and are cutting health benefits and everything. It's thrown by Bain Capital.
I didn't know that.
And one of my friend's pictures is on the headline of the website. Huh. Jeff Jarvis is
no kidding,
is dead center. one of my buddies, he's like, "Is that Jarvis?" Like, that's absolutely Jarvis. He works at one somewhere in New York City. I'm not sure, but yeah, his face is just poorly photoshopped out of whatever stock photo he was in, slapped dead center in this conglomeration of people.
We're gonna have to look that up in a minute. Did I just see a steak with butter on it on your TV? That makes me want to make steak even more than. Yeah. So, all right. So for $500, I would say, if I was doing it, I would probably go for broke on the interface.
Yeah, like what my Scarlett's got two real ins. Also has a Spitifin. Mm-hmm. Has MIDI, which as much as you don't want to think you're going to use it, you're going to use it. Sooner or later, you'll
either the control. Right. Things, or
if you only got a couple mics, you can use it for drum replacement. Yep. And I think it was $249 for mine. It's got headphone. It's got two other line outputs. It's got 4 line inputs plus the 2 front actual pre's. Or I think you spend another $50 and you get the one with light pipe in and a couple more line inputs and stuff. So it's expandable. So later on you can get, a nice 4-banger of inputs, or, an 8 pre and drive that through the light pipe. So for $300 you can do that and get yourself a pair of 57s, because why not?
Yep.
I mean,
that was my thought. Spend every dime you can on your interface, because that's something you want to hang on to for a good long time and get the most out of, get the most inputs and the best inputs you can get.
And you'll keep using it. Like, even though I've got, the big stuff at work, I've got this little Scarlett that I take with me and run that into the big stuff.
Yeah.
Because the pre's sound good and it's got the connectivity to do it.
Absolutely. And then, yeah, mic-wise, let's say you only spent, maybe you find a deal on something used. Like I was thinking of some of the slightly higher end Focusrite stuff, like the Sapphires or some of the larger Scarlett items. If you could find one of those used, or I don't know, what does Pro Tools got? What does Avid have with 8 inputs? I think anything you could
8
find.
real inputs.
Yeah.
I have to buy one of the big boxes. I think all the other stuff like the Digiracks are only 4 inputs. I don't know. I know they got some new stuff out, but I haven't paid any attention to it since Pro Tools started supporting other hardware.
Right.
I haven't really, that's the only reason I got Pro Tools, is because like, oh, well, now it'll run my other crap.
Work on everything. All right, so I would say like maybe go for 2 interfaces that each have 4 inputs, or get one interface that will let you plug in other pre's.
Yeah.
So like look for
the light pipes, the way to go.
And then microphones, just scrimp. Like maybe just spend that $100 on the MXL 990-91 again, and save up your paper route money to get some more stuff. But I would say if that's your price range, invest heavily in the interface. Worry about mics later, because you can find everything slightly used on eBay.
Yeah,
no problem.
And that's, I mean, you can't, like, if you're going to be recording on your computer, you can buy all kinds of mics. If you don't have a way to get them in, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah, doesn't make any sense to buy anything better than a 57 if you just have a junky.
Right.
If all you have is that ART interface, don't bother.
Will do you just fine.
Yeah. So, all right, let's double down again and go to, you've got $1,000 to set up a studio. Now I'm thinking, if I had that amount of money, you're not quite at the point where you can buy some really good monitors, but you probably want to be working on something better than a pair of like USB computer speakers.
Yeah.
I actually had a pretty good reaction to, I don't know if you remember a while back I talked about, I did a theater install, a little black box theater in the round with 6 of those Presonus Eris E5s, and I think they make an E8. So for roughly $180 or $200 a pop, you can get yourself a couple of decent, nothing like, dear mother, stop. Discovered life-changing monitors today. So, like, you're not going to run down to the Western Union office and sit right home to mother about them. Right. But you can pretty much get your work done on them.
Yeah, and I think the M Audio BX something 5s are around a couple $100 for the pair, maybe $300-400 for the pair. And those sound pretty good. I've done decent work on them. You're probably not going to be making big, giant albums, and if you are, then you figure out how to use them the right way.
Right.
Brandon's got a pair of them. My buddy Justin's got a pair of them. That's what they use. Their stuff comes out sound pretty good. So
yep. So actually, to backtrack again real quick, at the $500 level, I would say $250 to $300 on an interface. Spend at least $100 on a decent pair of cans, and then whatever else you got left on used microphones. So, all right, for $1,000, I would say branch out, get that decent interface. Spend roughly a third to a half on a pair of cones to listen on, and then whatever you got left, scrape it together and come up with some mics.
And that, like, start looking for nicer utility mics. Like, a 421's not great on vocals, but it's great on everything else. And that's, what are those? Those are $380, brand new, but you can find older ones for around $300. Or an RE20 sounds pretty good on most stuff. An RE20 sounds great on vocals too.
Oh, it's a terrific vocal mic.
Sounds great on vocals. Used to be the standard on kick drums. Sounds okay on floor tom. Sounds really good on bass cabinet and on organ. Sounds okay on guitars. So right. I don't know, but maybe even go back with an SM7B, because that covers pretty much everything. I'm not sure about it on kick drum, but most other stuff you can get away with it pretty well. Definitely sounds good on guitars and bass and vocals and stuff.
And you notice we haven't brought up DIs yet, because with any of these little interfaces, a lot of them have, you can bring line level right in. So if your buddy's going to be cutting it up on the wheels of steel, you can just plug that straight into your interface. I'm not even going to get into RIAA emphasis. You can look that up on your own time. But, if you need to plug an instrument in, a lot of these have a switch where it'll better
Switch
match
from-
the impedance coming off of a pickup than just plugging a guitar or a bass into a line level input, which will work. I mean, if you're just throwing together demos and scratching out ideas, you can just plug into the input on your computer. I mean, download Audacity for free, get a couple adapters at Radio Shack. You can plug anything you can find into the input jack on your laptop, and off you go. You can get it on there. Although at that point, you might be better off just singing into your phone and emailing it to yourself, which
happens.
It's surprising how much work you can get done. I heard an example of a record. I mean, this was years ago too. I mean, this example was probably 4 years old of somebody that recorded a pretty decent sounding demo in GarageBand with nothing but a MacBook. I mean, nothing. Like, they played their instruments on the keyboard, played the guitar parts in on the key, and I mean like the QWERTY keyboard, not like they had a MIDI keyboard hooked up. I mean, they played notes on the QWERTY keyboard.
You hit caps lock and that little button in Logic, the keyboard shows up.
Right, yeah. Well, actually, we were joking in the studio. Like, that's how my boss writes guitar lines, because he's a key player primarily. Like, and he's too lazy to go get a keyboard and drag it over to his computer, so he just... What was he joking? Like, that one killer lead line he wrote was
Shift star 8.
AB Shift star 8. Was that descending line from... All right, and from there, so let's see. At $500, you're going to get the best interface you can get, a decent pair of headphones, which our humble suggestion would be the Sennheiser HD 280s. Yep. Yeah, you can spend more money and get better sounding stuff, but we're finding, and a lot of people that we talk to agree with us, they're really the NS10s of headphones.
You can't cheat.
There's something about, like, other cheap headphones, like, there's some hype in them. Like, there's no hype in them, but the frequency response is pretty good. There's a little stuff in the mids, a little stuff in the highs, but they're really not that hard to get acquainted with, and it's not that hard to do a mix on them and have it translate. Like, the third mix that I attempted with headphones sounded okay in my car.
Yeah, it's. I mean, what you have to realize is that you're not going to get big, thumpy, booming bass out of. You will,
right.
But when you play it anywhere else, it's going to be
exactly.
Dear Jesus.
And it's kind of like those guys that say, they say you can do big bass working on NS10s because you just watch the cones, and when they start to flap too much, then you know you've got enough bass. All right, so
swap out all the parts on the NS10s again, please.
Swap all the parts.
Quick, before the bass drops again.
All right, so let's up the ante again. Say you have $200 to spend on your home studio, or $2,000 rather, $2,000, too large, 2 G's. What do you buy? A pair of Adams. Period.
Just do it. I don't know. I've been hearing some weird stuff, guys. Apparently, that just hate ribbon tweeters, and I'm not sure why.
I
don't know.
Like, their heads adjusted.
They're, those are, your tried and true, like, NS10s are the end of the world type guys, and they definitely have their place. I understand that. Like, we did a lot of mixing today and leveling stuff. Like, they're great for that. Because you can't cheat with them. Like, stuff's going to sound... Like, if you make something sound good on NS10s, it's going to sound great everywhere else. They're just, they do what they're supposed to do. They don't sound great doing it. I don't know. Maybe it's the amps running it. I've heard that has a lot of stuff to do with it. If you're running a cheap amp to drive your NS10s, it's going to sound like nuts. But if you got a good amp that's clean and...
What do they actually have on that one? Do they have a Hafler in there?
It's a Yamaha amp. The California Roads.
I was going to say, I didn't remember NS10 sounding that bad, but that explains a little bit. Because you hear them everywhere. Like, guys still have them for home stereo units.
Bryston.
On like a Harman Kardon, like on a decent home stereo amp. I've heard them, like the little Hafler amps for being cheap are actually pretty good. I've heard them on Crown D75s.
I was going to say that, yeah.
I had an amazing moment, and I don't know if I've ever fired these up for you. You know those Bose speakers that are on the wall in my shop?
Oh, those work?
They do.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I got these. I picked them up at a pawn shop for, I think, $40 for the pair. They're the Bose Stereo Everywhere speakers, and they don't rely on any trickery other than the angle of the face of the cabinet. Mm-hmm. So what they are is like they're about the size of a studio monitor, but instead of the speaker being on the flat face, the top of them are sort of 45'd off.
Right.
And that's where the speaker is. And then there's a slit port. So they actually have pretty decent bass response, especially if they're plugged like right up against the wall. Like they actually sound good right on the wall. So half space works well for them. They don't need a processor for any of their trickery. But because of the angle of the speakers and the way the sound disperses out of them, I believe they're coaxial. the sweet spot for the stereo image is wider than the speakers are apart themselves. So like my cones are they're 7 feet apart. You can clearly hear the left and the right side in a proper stereo image anywhere on a 15-foot radius. Like you can be almost out the door of my shop before it starts to just go mushy.
I don't think I didn't know they worked, so we never turned them on when I was over there.
Yeah, I got a Crown D75A in there, a little 100-watt single-space Crown amp. It needs to be cleaned. I need to PM it because it's, it's been in my shop for 5 years. You turn it on and it sounds like chicken shit in Marlboro.
I was going to say cigarette butts and chicken feed fly out.
Yep. Spiders crawl out. I was actually a little nervous about like reaching around behind it sight unseen because I didn't know if it was
you gonna get bit by
something. Yeah,
something bigger than
one
you.
of my favorite guitar players just died from a spider bite. I'm a little paranoid now. So anyway, I had a lovely moment with those. I was thinking like, all right, if I really get a lot of mastering work and nothing serious happens with the kids and my car doesn't break down, I might be able to afford a pair of Adam A5s here in a year.
Yeah.
And then I turned those Bose on just to see what they sounded like. I actually never did any work with them. I got them just about the time the bottom dropped out of punk bands wanting to record in my garage. So I never actually used them on a project. I might have listened to a couple cuts on them. And, no, again, they're not, they're not the Adams, they're not NS10s, they're not anything, but they're good enough. Like I know it's discouraged. You talk in the forums like, oh, are these home stereo speakers good enough to work on? I'll tell you what, anything's good enough to work on.
Just so you know how to use it.
If you know how to translate a mix.
Brandon was telling me about somebody who's like, you can mix and master a CD on a pair of those headphones that come with a CD player if you know what to do with them.
Yep.
That's where it's at.
I would go along with that. There are some heavy hitters that work on as hyped as they are and as non-natural as they are. Like, there are big players in the industry that literally use Beats by Dre for their cans.
It hurts on the inside just to hear that.
Guys that make that way more money than me. I can't even afford a pair of Beats by Dre.
You get the cheap ones, Beat by D.
But it says it in Chinese. All right. Wow. Well, we made it to the hour, so... Once again, I'm not going to do all my usual stuff. Check out Reddit. There's some super audio forums in there. I can't remember if I updated. There's a resources page on our blog, which if you are a listener and not yet a reader, please do be navigating to smart2noise.blogspot.com. We'd love to have you stop in there. Just a heads up for anybody. We're trying to work on getting an RSS feed up for the podcast. And actually, because Google Reader is closing down here either this month or next month, we're actually going to change how we do our subscriptions. So if you have subscribed to the blog, keep your eyes peeled. We'll definitely put up like a few notices so that you don't miss it. We're going to switch how our feed is done. So you're probably going to have to re-up unless you know more about RSS than me, and you can magically make it transfer over to your new one. But at any rate, when the new one is set up, you will be able to also optionally subscribe to the podcast. And I don't know if I'm going to bother. Should we put it on iTunes?
Couldn't hurt. Everybody uses it.
We might.
It's free, right? We
don't want to get laughed at.
Yeah.
For all, our following is like 40 people that listen to the podcast with any sort of regularity. But
well, if the iTunes thing takes care of our RSS feed,
yeah. But then we'll actually have to do a proper show every week, don't you think?
No, we don't. Have you seen the stuff they put on iTunes?
Not really.
They have a master for iTunes section. Maybe if we master the podcast for iTunes.
I need to learn how to do that. I'm sure it's going to come up.
Hit the nuke button.
Right. Well, anyway, on the blog, reason I started going there was we've got a page of resources, which is links to a lot of the stuff that we talk about all the time. I do need to get a couple new links on there, but Pensato's Place, the Audio Nowcast, we'll get links up there to the Reddit forums. Some of the other forums, Gear Sluts is on there, Pro Sound Web, Control Booth. If you do any theater work, that's a great place to hang out. So there's links to plenty of people who aren't us. I actually need to get a link up there to the home recording blog because those guys, I don't know how, because they do it exactly like we do. They gave it away in like the 15th or 16th episode. They're like, yeah, we don't actually plan. We show up, we decide what the show is going to be about. We go read Wikipedia for 10 minutes, basically read that to you, provide a couple examples, and then BS our way out to the ending credits. And so, well, they do edit heavily, though, which is why it sounds better. It's like they edit out all the ums and likes and hesitations. But do check that one out. Like, if seriously,
That's half the show.
We've been criticized for not running a very orderly shop. So if you're looking for that type of show, actually, Pensado's Place isn't really that either, nor is the Audio Nowcast. But the home recording show is that, and they're very good about having examples and giving. They actually look up links that they talk about and put them in the show notes and stuff. So. Way to send business away, John. But for those of you out there, all 40 strong, that like to listen to us do this every week, rest assured we're going to keep doing it week in, week out, because we do it anyway. So it doesn't take that long to get out a couple of microphones and press record. Actually, a couple of things coming up. Carl hopes to join us here one of these weeks. He keeps saying he's going to be free Wednesday nights, and then he keeps being not. He married a sickly gal. She's Mrs. Carl has the consumption or something.
I don't know what that means, but it sounds awful.
One of our Reddit friends. I've been. It's been like since last month, beginning of last month. Got his Skype number and invited him to come hang out with us one of these nights. So maybe a night when I'm hanging out here and we're not doing the podcast, we'll get on with. Ex-U.S. Marine, our buddy from Reddit, and jawbone with him a little bit so we can work him into a show. And we also need to try and figure out how to get Ica on a show, because if we owe anybody a plug, it's that guy. And we'll just have to work out the timetable of it. Like, one of us is going to have to get up very early, and I think as the German, it should be him. As if anyone's genetically predisposed to be motivated to get up in the morning and be coherent,
it's not the Americans.
It's not. Yeah, it's not the Scottish American or the Jew.
Yeah. I don't know. Let's wrap it up before this gets out of hand.
Good crash. That was a good crash. Any crash you can walk away from is a good crash. Remember that, kids, especially when working with Pro Tools. Oh, he's got jokes. All right. So that's about that. Check out the blog if you're not already checking out. By all means, get in touch with us. Look us up on Facebook. Look us up on Twitter. We will totally answer your questions, reply to your comments, be your buddy, so on and so forth. We're also for hire. If you got work you need done. I found out this week that I'm better than Beat Detective. If you want that, and I will work for Chinese food. You can mail me a gift certificate.
Yeah, it's got to be warm when he gets it, though.
Yeah. Don't mail me Chinese food. You can mail me a gift certificate, though, and I will edit your drum tracks to spot-on perfection. All right, and on that note, we're going to wrap this show up. We'll see you next week, if you're lucky.
Have a good night, guys.